The former Chelsea and England captain, Ray Wilkins, has died at the age of 61. He was being treated in hospital in London after suffering a cardiac arrest last week. Ray Wilkins made his name at Chelsea and went on to play for Manchester United, AC Milan, Rangers and QPR. This afternoon, his family thanked friends, colleagues and the public for all the messages they've had since he was taken ill. Richard Conway reports.
And Wilkins has scored one, and that's absolutely magnificent.
Goals and glory weren't the biggest part of Ray Wilkins' game, but he provided plenty of them nonetheless, such as here in the 1983 FA Cup final. For club and country, he was the oil in the team's engine, emphasising passing and possession long before those qualities were as widely appreciated as they are today.
That was my philosophy of the game: keep the ball, make the opposition work, so when they receive the ball, now they're tired because they've had to work hard to get it back. Don't give the ball away cheaply. Normally as a player you have one thing that you can do quite well, and I would like people to say that I could pass the ball well, whether it be sideways or forward. I'm not too sure.
A natural leader, he captained Chelsea while still a teenager. After 6 years at Stamford Bridge, it was on to Manchester United, which incorporated that FA Cup win. He then signed for Rangers after a spell at AC Milan.
Ray Wilkins scores for England.
But it was arguably England where he set himself apart, winning 84 caps over the course of a decade. His sending off at the 1986 World Cup demonstrating the passion that was always a part of his play.
He lived for the game and he loved the game, Ray, and he was massively passionate when he played. He had high expectations of you when you played alongside him. People genuinely loved the man. He was a great guy and a wonderful footballer.
After retiring as a player, he naturally progressed to managing and coaching, assisting Chelsea to a Premier League and FA Cup double in 2010. Ray Wilkins will be remembered as a gentleman of the game who did the little things for some of the biggest clubs, perhaps the ultimate team player.
Ray Wilkins, who has died today at the age of 61.
Before that, though, tributes have been paid to former England and Chelsea and QPR player Ray Wilkins, who's died in hospital after a cardiac arrest. He started his career as an apprentice at Stamford Bridge, and that's where we can join our reporter, Jim Weeble. And Jim, a very sad day at the bridge.
Absolutely, Riz. You can probably see in the background the flag at half-mast, and really that's because at Chelsea is where Ray Wilkins became a football star in the late 70s. He became the captain at the age of 18, quite a feat really, and he stayed in that position for 4 years, helping to take the team back to the first division. And so Chelsea were really the first to comment, one of the first to comment this afternoon about the sad news of Ray Wilkins' death. In a tweet, they said, "Everybody associated with Chelsea Football Club is devastated to learn of the passing of our former player, captain and assistant coach." And that tweet alludes to another successful side of Ray Wilkins' life as a coach and a manager. Nathaniel Chalabar, a first team player at Premier League Watford, said in a tweet, "Really sad news about my former coach Ray Wilkins. At the tender age of 15, he put his arm around me and helped me during my transition into the first team." Just a couple of the many tweets from this afternoon.
And Jim, Chelsea, of course, not the only London club that he had connections to.
That's right, links all over London. As a player, he had 2 spells at QPR. He managed that team as well in the mid-90s. He played at Crystal Palace. He played at Leyton, Orient and Millwall towards the end of his career. He was assistant manager at Millwall as well. And he managed at Watford and Fulham too. And with that in-depth knowledge, also then went on to have a successful career as a pundit. He'll be sorely missed by many, if not most, if not all, in the football world in this country.
Jim Weeble there, thank you, with the tributes to Ray Wilkins.
Football has been paying tribute to the former England, Chelsea and Manchester United player Ray Wilkins, who's died after suffering a heart attack. He was 61. Chelsea described him as its greatest, most famous and most admired homegrown player. Duncan Golestani looks back at his career.
Langley to warm things up has worked so well for Chelsea. Here's Wilkins. Now, what a shot that is! Oh, the goal!
Ray Wilkins represented some of the biggest clubs, but all agree Chelsea was always in his heart.
Wilkins is in there!
Wilkins captained the club at just 18 years old. Today, Chelsea paid tribute to one of its favourite sons. Ray Wilkins was the young jewel in the Chelsea team of the second half of the 1970s, shining like a beacon of hope during dark times for the club. Without question, one of Chelsea's greatest, most famous and most admired homegrown players, Ray was a much-loved icon and ambassador. He will be dreadfully missed. After Chelsea, Wilkins made his big-money move to Manchester United in 1983, helping them win the FA Cup.
Oh, a brilliant goal by Ray Wilkins!
As a youngster watching him play for England and Manchester United in particular, really elegant, talented ball player, which wasn't necessarily the way English football was then.
He basically was a little bit ahead of his time. He wanted to keep the ball. He knew the value of possession. And, you know, he could play little short passes, he could play square passes, but he could also play the passes that would hurt the opposition and would create goals.
Later in his career, there were spells at QPR, Rangers and AC Milan before he returned to his boyhood club as a coach. On the pitch, Ray Wilkins used to say you had to be competitive, but off it, as kind as a man can be. It is a virtue he lived up to.
Ray Wilkins, who died this morning.
The former Chelsea captain, Ray Wilkins, has died in hospital following a cardiac arrest. He was 61. He started his long career as a midfielder turned broadcaster at Stamford Bridge. Today, the club said they were devastated to learn of the passing of their former player, captain and assistant coach. Known too, of course, for his time at QPR and his international career playing for England. Described as kind and warm-hearted, Toby Sadler looks at his life in football.
Ray Wilkins delights the fans at QPR. Nicknamed Butch, the midfielder played nearly 700 games in a nomadic career. He played for iconic clubs such as Manchester United, AC Milan and Paris Saint-Germain. But he will best be remembered for his time at Chelsea.
Has worked so well for Chelsea. Here's Wilkins. Now what a shot that is! Oh, the goal! Oh, my word, what a goal!
He joined the club as an apprentice, playing his first game aged just 17 in 1973. Wilkins then returned to the club at the end of his playing career as a much-loved coach.
Ray was a true gent, a footballing man, so much knowledge, just someone you wanted his respect, you wanted him to like as a player, you go to him for knowledge. He was everything, you know. A gentleman is not too often used in football, but he was a true gent.
In a statement, Chelsea said, everybody associated with Chelsea Football Club is devastated to learn of the passing of former player, captain and assistant coach Ray Wilkins. Rest in peace, Ray. You will be dreadfully missed. Fans outside the club paid tribute to Ray Wilkins, who was described by one former manager as a real blue blood.
When I heard that news today, it was awful. Such a young guy, and yeah, it's very sad for the football club.
I think he was a fantastic guy, great role model. Such a shame. Very, very early to die. I think for Chelsea, huge loss.
Yeah, very good player, a legend.
Ray Wilkins' talent saw him called up for England. He played 84 times in a 10-year international career. He famously became the first England player to be sent off at a World Cup after throwing a ball at the referee.
Well, you don't get 84 caps, I think it was, for nothing. He was very close to getting into the 100 club. And for a midfield player, that's fantastic. I think that he's going to always be looked upon as, a great player and, certainly a Chelsea legend. That's where he started his club. And an England legend.
Ray Wilkins' career spanned decades from player to manager to TV and radio pundit. He will be missed by the footballing world, but most as a family man, a husband, father and grandfather.
Remembering Ray Wilkins, who has died aged 61.
Now, tributes have been paid to the former England football captain Ray Wilkins, who's died at the age of 61. He'd been critically ill in hospital after suffering heart problems. In a long and distinguished career, he played for Chelsea, Manchester United and Glasgow Rangers, as our correspondent Richard Conway reports now.
And Wilkins has scored one, and that's absolutely magnificent.
Goals and glory weren't the biggest part of Ray Wilkins' game, but he provided plenty of them nonetheless, such as here in the 1983 FA Cup final. For club and country, he was the oil in the team's engine, emphasising passing and possession long before those qualities were as widely appreciated as they are today.
That was my philosophy of the game: keep the ball, make the opposition work, so when they receive the ball, now they're tired because they've had to work hard to get it back. Don't give the ball away cheaply. Normally as a player you have one thing that you can do quite well, and I would like people to say that I could pass the ball well, whether it be sideways or forward. I'm not too sure.
A natural leader, he captained Chelsea while still a teenager. After 6 years at Stamford Bridge, it was on to Manchester United, which incorporated that FA Cup win. He then signed for Rangers after a spell at AC Milan.
Ray Wilkins scores for England.
But it was arguably England where he set himself apart, winning 84 caps over the course of a decade. His sending off at the 1986 World Cup demonstrating the passion that was always a part of his play.
He lived for the game and he loved the game, Ray, and he was massively passionate when he played. He had high expectations of you when you played alongside him. People genuinely loved the man. He was a great guy and a wonderful footballer.
After retiring as a player, he naturally progressed to managing and coaching, assisting Chelsea to a Premier League and FA Cup double in 2010. Ray Wilkins will be remembered as a gentleman of the game who did the little things for some of the biggest clubs, perhaps the ultimate team player.
Today's many tributes to the former England football captain Ray Wilkins.
The death of a former England football captain is a significant loss to the sport and to the country, of course. When that player is only 61 and held in as much regard as Ray Wilkins, then the tragedy is much more magnified. He never recovered from a cardiac arrest last week. Ray Wilkins possessed a rare combination of silky skills and a driving, combative leadership, most notably for Chelsea, but also for Manchester United, Rangers and other clubs besides. But in the many tributes today, what has stood out is the kindness he showed to others.
Here's Wilkins. Now, what a shot that is!
For club and country, football was Ray Wilkins' life, and Chelsea was his first love.
Wilkins is in there!
As a player, coach or pundit, he was a face of football for 5 decades. And tonight, those at the top of the sport and those he played with say he'll be greatly missed.
To also get to know him as a person and the gentleman that he was, the time he had for everybody. Humility is a wonderful thing to have, and he came to a team full of young upstarts and he had that humility and an absolute class act.
His former teammate Glenn Hoddle told me Wilkins was a player he always respected.
I roomed with him when I was 18 years of age, and it was a learning curve for me. Although he was only a year older than me, he seemed about 5-6 years older than me. He was very mature at that age, and I learnt a lot off him.
He played for 11 clubs, but his heart was always at Chelsea, his boyhood club, where at 18 he became their youngest ever captain. His big money move took him to Manchester United, where in 1983 he helped them win the FA Cup. The following year, he became one of the first English footballers to head abroad, joining AC Milan for a British record of £1.5 million.
He basically was a little bit ahead of his time. He wanted to keep the ball. He knew the value of possession. And, you know, he could play little short passes, he could play square passes, but he could also play the passes that would hurt the opposition and would create goals.
After his playing career was over, Wilkins turned to punditry and coaching with a return to his childhood club. He touched every aspect of the game and nowhere more than Chelsea, which has described him this evening as one of their greatest.
Memories of Ray Wilkins, a genius and gentleman of the game.
Good evening. Today, the Champions League action has been overshadowed by the very sad news of the passing of Ray Wilkins, one of football's most popular characters. The former Chelsea, Manchester United and England midfielder passed away after suffering a heart attack over Easter. Roy Keane and Lee Dixon are here. Our tribute to Ray Wilkins later in the programme includes the England manager Gareth Southgate and friend and former teammate Glenn Hoddle. Well, we began the programme talking about the sad passing of Ray Wilkins. His playing career spanned 24 years and 4 countries and included Chelsea, Manchester United, AC Milan, PSG and Rangers. He captained England 10 times in 84 appearances. He was Carlo Ancelotti's assistant in the Chelsea double-winning side of 2009-10. Former England manager Glenn Hoddle and current manager Gareth Southgate were at Anfield tonight and both spoke to Gabriel.
Butch Wilkins, Ray Wilkins there.
And now there's Wilkins going all the way through. Wilkins! Oh, a lovely goal!
As a youngster watching him play for England, really elegant, talented ball player, which wasn't necessarily the way English football was then.
Great player, great coach. He was a leader. He was professional, loved football.
I got to know him. He joined Crystal Palace. We played about 67 minutes together against Liverpool and got an absolute chasing from Jan Molby. So whenever we met, I used to talk to him about that, to be able to get his stories and his insight on the game, and to also get to know him as a person and the gentleman that he was. The time he had for everybody. Humility is a wonderful thing to have, and he came to a team full of young upstarts and he had that humility and an absolute class act.
Here's Wilkins. Now, what a shot that is! Oh, the goal! Oh, my word, what a goal!
That's what I'll always remember Ray for. His great play on the pitch, but we had laughs, and I'll remember him forever in that mind.
From taking the under-21s and now with the senior team, he'd often send messages through of support, and just everything that came through was his pride in England, his pride in having represented England, and again, I go back to him being just a class act.
Oh, a brilliant goal by Ray Wilkins!
Well, Lee, going around the football grounds of the country as we do, you'd often see him broadcasting, wouldn't you, after his coaching career? Always friendly, always charming, and always very modest about what a good player he was.
Absolutely. A warmer, more generous, humble man you couldn't meet. He was an absolute gem. And he always had time for people, always wanted to talk about football, as you said, and that was, regardless of what he was like on the pitch, that was just him as a man. And he was, he shone the room up. Every time he was in the Chelsea press room or anything like that, you could see him smiling across the room. Absolute gentleman.
And he played at Manchester United, obviously, a decade before you, when your team were winning leagues. The team he played in, as we saw, was more of a cup side in those days.
Yeah, when you see the goal he got there against, I think it was Brighton, the FA Cup final, I think he summed up his career where he made what I admired about him when I was growing up watching him, and this goal sums up. He makes the game look so easy, and we know how difficult it is. And on top of all that, from every time I've spoke to anybody about him, said what a brilliant human being, and you know, what a sad loss.
Yeah, and the fact that he travelled as well, obviously, went from Man United to AC Milan, went to PSG, played for Rangers. I mean, very well-travelled, urbane gentleman.
Do you know what my memory of him as I was growing up was? I wanted to look in my kit, how Ray Wilkins looked in his kit. He always looked really cool in his kit, the way he wore his shorts, the way his shirt was just out a bit at the front. Just a stylish man.
Ray Wilkins, who passed away today at the age of 61.
Ahead of all Saturday's games, Premier League fans up and down the country paid tribute to Ray Wilkins, who passed away earlier this week, aged 61. Football remembered the former England, Chelsea and Manchester United midfielder. He was a genuinely lovely man who was liked by everybody. He'll be missed, and our thoughts are with his family.
Well, the footballing world today paid tribute to Ray Wilkins at a memorial service for the Chelsea legend. The former midfielder and coach died last month at the age of 61. He'd suffered a fall after going into cardiac arrest. His career also saw him represent England and play for Manchester United. The service took place at St Luke's and Christ Church in Chelsea.